Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, February 8th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the United States Senate elections in 2022. In fact, this November, as of how the predicted betting markets end up expecting these races to go. Now, the reason why we're taking a look at political betting markets is not because I am trying to in any way encourage gambling in the betting markets or in the political prediction type of market. The reason why I'm looking at this is because thousands upon thousands of users have put their input into many of these hotly contested Senate races, putting their money, where their mouth is, and pretty much predicting the outcome of elections and banking sometimes thousands of dollars on the eventual outcome of many of these contested races. Now, historically speaking, the political betting markets aren't always correct, but a lot of the times they are. And the reason why they tend to be correct is simply because people would put election analysis and an actuality in terms of the victor before they will put forth their own partisan agenda. When it comes down to political predictions that have no type of monetary pushback, some people might be inclined to predict an election in a certain way that is different than what the actual results will end up being. For instance, if someone was in a non-binding position, they could easily say that Joe Biden will win just one singular state in 2024, and there will be no type of monetary repercussion as a response. When it comes down to the betting markets, you simply can't do that. Even though you may want Joe Biden, in one case, to win a singular state and lose the rest, it doesn't matter because the betting markets aren't a place for your own personal, grievances with politicians or expectations that are extreme, that are completely unrealistic, but rather a place for some type of expected certainty in many of these races. And that's why they provide us with a bit of insight as to how people with some type of election analysis skills are actually willing to put their money where their mouth is and how they expect many of these races to go. Now, we're going to be taking a look at a bunch of states that do not have current surveys in terms of the betting markets. These are states that are really going to be characterized as safe, and they don't deserve, or at least based off of what we have seen from, different political groups, don't necessarily deserve their own political betting markets. And, that's just an unfortunate circumstance. Generally speaking, though, it makes sense. States such as Washington, Oregon, California, and Hawaii simply don't have their own betting market because these races, we know how they're going to go. Other states without a betting market are the states such as Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma. What you have is the state of Arkansas, Louisiana, Kentucky, Indiana. You also have the states of South Carolina and Alabama. And for the rest of these states, surprisingly enough, in this region at least, we're getting to the Northeast. New York does not have one. Connecticut does not have one. Surprisingly enough, Vermont does. New Hampshire does. The state of Maryland also, doesn't, but I expected there to be one simply because Larry Hogan was potentially going to run for Senate. He actually announces today that he's not going to. Illinois does not have one, and for the rest of them, they actually do. Now, in looking at this map, you might be surprised to see states such as Utah and Missouri on the list, but the rest of them, and Vermont, and the rest of them really shouldn't shock you. It makes sense that states such as Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Hampshire, all states that used to be competitive or are competitive, are on this map. Alaska is likely there because Lisa Murkowski is facing off against a very strong GOP contender against her, who has been endorsed by President Trump. So I think what they're expecting there is potentially that Lisa Murkowski could in fact lose, and that if it ends up going into a ranked choice voting between a Democrat and a Republican, that maybe some type of circumstance will prove either party otherwise. But at the end of the day, generally speaking, that map is only there, that state is only being surveyed primarily because of the fact that there is a major GOP contender against the incumbent Republican senator, which is why we focus on the race. Now, considering that 19 races here are not surveyed, that leaves us with a total of 15 races to characterize. And honestly speaking, many of these are extremely predictable. In looking at the way that Joe Biden is currently disapproved of and looking at the way that the Democrats are below the Republicans on the generic ballot, you could probably predict these states just straight off of that alone. And one thing that I do want to say is that before we get into this, we need to talk about the way that we are characterizing states. States that are in a tilt column, meaning this, very faint red and faint blue, those are states that have betting markets where the certain political party in the advantage is 50 to 60 cents for a yes share, meaning that the eventual outcome would give them, if predicted correctly, would allow these people who bought in at that rate to cash out 40 cents. That's the thing. Looking at the lean rating here, 60 to 70 cents, 70 to 80 for likely, and 81 cents or more for safe. So the characterizations look very similar to tilt, lean, likely, and safe. So the likely is a little bit brighter of a red. So in characterizing many of these states, what you are going to find is that states that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be deemed as safe by margin might be deemed safe by political betting markets, or potentially states that, aren't necessarily likely or lean by margin, or expected to be at least, might end up that way simply based off of the political betting markets. We're going to start off with all of the states that we can characterize immediately as safe Republican and safe Democrat. The Democrats, of course, have the state of Vermont in their safe column, and the Republicans have the states of Utah, Alaska, and the state of Missouri. Now, that's not necessarily just it. I want to talk about these three states in particular because these are states that we generally expect to be considered safe. Missouri went to Trump by over 15, as did Utah. The state of Alaska went to Trump by 10.1, but considering that the top two contenders right now are Republicans, does seem to tell me that Republicans probably are going to do well in the state of Alaska. Moving beyond these states, the next few states that are considered to be safe Republican are actually the states of Iowa and Ohio. This is pretty surprising if you ask me. I mean, the fact that Ohio and Iowa are on par with states such as Utah, Missouri, and Alaska is definitely beyond me, but it partially makes sense. These states might end up being closer than the 2020 presidential election, but we have never moved them out of the Republican column. It's not like 2018 or 2020, where some pretty previously solid conservative states end up fluctuating back and forth. I think that we already know how this two states are going to go, and there really is no purpose in trying to convince people otherwise, especially when money is on the line. The final state that has a safe GOP characterization is the state of Florida. Again, a big surprise to see a state such as Florida in the solid red column. But of course, that's just the way that we are working with, simply because of our national environment. And also Marco Rubio's popularity, and also the political betting markets keep it here above 81 cents for a share. So that brings the Republican Party to 36, and the Democrats are at 37. So the Democrats have some type of narrow lead. I think that once we actually add in the remaining states that are currently in yellow, you will find that that lead ends up dissipating, but that is something for later down the line. Moving beyond these safe states, what we have are states that are characterized by the likely margin, and there actually aren't that many. The thing for Democrats is that they actually don't win many of these seats that are considered to be close and competitive, and that's simply because, again, like I said, the national environment is not on their side. They're down in the generic ballot, Joe Biden is unpopular, and people are expecting the worst for the Democratic Party, and the political forecasters are no different. Moving beyond the safe states, what we have are likely states, and I'm actually going to start with the GOP since I started with the Democrats previously. And the only likely Republican state is the state of North Carolina. This is a state where, we can pretty much expect the GOP to win, but there is a possibility that it does narrow up. Crazier things have happened. It also depends a lot on the GOP nominee. If the Republicans get a very strong one who isn't Pat McCrory, I would actually say that this state could very well warrant being a solid state by betting market standard, but right now it seems to be that there is slightly a bit of apprehension, but nothing super significant. As for the Democrats, they have their own likely state, and it actually is the state of Colorado, where they pretty much expect to win across this state. There doesn't seem to be a possibility for the GOP to pick up this race, and Democrats are pretty much pushing back on it and saying that this race is the Democratic Party's, pretty solid one to show off and, win in what is expected to be potentially a very bad year for the Democratic Party. So that puts the Democrats at 38, just one seat ahead of the Republican Party at 37. But again, this whole count is convoluted until we actually finish our United States Senate map. But characterizing the next states are where this map is going to get very tricky. Many of these states are going to be lean, and they are going to be a little bit hard to predict, and they have been historically very hard to predict. Starting off with the GOP in the Sunbelt region, they have the states of Arizona and Georgia in the lean margin. Now remind yourself that the betting market odds for lean means it's between 60 and 70 cents for, in this case, a Republican victory, and honestly that isn't super unbelievable in either of these two states. I would say it's more believable in Georgia than it is in the state of Arizona, but it isn't out of the question for some type of GOP candidates and surrogates and supporters to expect the Republican Party to perform well in states that used to be, very well. Very solid Republican states. So it really isn't much of a stretch. Moving beyond the states of Arizona and Georgia, you actually have two states the Democrats are really vying for in terms of pickups, the states of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Now that puts the Republicans immediately at 41, and I would say that that is a pretty bad result for the GOP, for the Democratic Party. What you find, though, in the states of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania is that while they are swing states, and they are states that voted for Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election, that their dislike and disdain for President Biden is enough to sway their vote back to the GOP. Now, that isn't the case of everyone. I think that it is going to be inevitably a close race, as these predicted betting markets might suggest. People are keeping it close for a reason. If it was a done deal, the map would have been safe red all across the board. But it isn't. So we have to wait and see. I think that it definitely comes down to, what we expect on either side. On one hand, I think that the states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona as a whole need to be addressed as states that the Democratic Party simply cannot afford to lose if they want to retain control, or at least need to win the majority of them to at least have some type of over 50 control. They could technically hold just Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada and New Hampshire in order to retain the Senate majority. But in terms of blocking Manchin and Sinema from being the major, top two in the United States Senate, they would need to win more than just the few states. So looking at our map right now, the Republican Party is at 41 and the Democrats are at 38. And the map actually doesn't get much better for Democrats. While they do have a lean Dem characterization in the state of New Hampshire, which I would say is probably one of the better things that they have gotten out of this, the state of Nevada actually moves away from them. And the state of Nevada goes to a tilt margin for the GOP. The betting markets expect the Republicans to win in Arizona. They expect the Republicans to win in Nevada. They expect Republicans to win in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Ohio, Iowa, Florida. 9 states that used to be competitive or are competitive in 2022 that the political betting markets seem to be at least generally confident about the ability for these Republicans to win there. More so in every single state that I mentioned besides the state of Nevada, but even including it, the Republican Party is in a position where they likely are confident and the betting markets are as well. So characterizing the remaining states, what you find is that the map ends up with 42 Republicans and 39 Democrats. And the good news for the GOP is that this map actually doesn't get any better for the Democratic Party. The Democrats, of course, win in Washington, Oregon, California. They also win in Illinois. Republicans win in Idaho, North and South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Indiana. So Democrats are now and a number in which they are 47% of the Senate delegation, 47 seats, and the Republicans are at 53. This actually brings them exactly back to where they were in 2018, which leads into the 2024 Senate elections, where Democrats are likely to further be demolished, considering that Senate map all taken into account. So, seeing our current map here, the GOP is at 53 to 47, with the Republican Party flipping the states of Nevada, Arizona, and the state of Georgia. Taking a look at my most recent Senate election projection, I'm actually quite surprised to see that they are very similar for the most part. The only major differences are Florida is now safe red, Pennsylvania is now a Republican state, Nevada's a little bit closer, Arizona is actually a bit more conservative. So looking at some of these states, while it does seem to match up a lot with the 2020 election, I do think that a lot more other environments and external circumstances will be impacting the outcome and the eventual outcome of this race that we will see come this November. So final map here, there isn't much of a difference between my most recent LTE projection and this map that is given out by the betting markets. There is one big difference though, that the state of not Nevada, the state of Pennsylvania is blue on my map, and the state of Pennsylvania is lean red on their map. It is going to be interesting though. I think that we are in for a very wild ride in the United States Senate, and it definitely will come down to many of these toss-up states that are currently being discussed in the political betting markets. Final map here, 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats. It's just a matter of a waiting game at this point in time. What we are going to find is that the predicted betting markets, while aren't going to be 100% accurate, probably will have given us a very good depiction. I will circle back in November to take a look at how the betting markets, for the first time that I actually covered a video like this, using the betting markets to predict specifically these midterms because I had used it in the past. I'm excited to see what the results were and whether or not the political betting markets were truly valid, in the sense that, this is my one of my first few times actually experiencing the political betting markets. I didn't really understand it back when I made videos on it in 2018, 2019, so I'm so excited to have it as a resource again for the 2022 midterm elections, and providing that content to you guys is something that I really enjoy, and it does reveal some very interesting results. But it also might suggest that there is a bit more crossover and agreement, between this map and my own prediction than we might have otherwise thought. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist of my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.